Hi, and welcome to another episode of Through the Monocle. Today we are going to be discussing the 1997 cult classic Starship Troopers and why it is so criminally underrated. Hi, I'm your host, Grant Ingram, and today, as I said, we're going to be discussing Starship Troopers. Joining me, it is my good friend Grant Skillen. How are you doing, Grant?
I'm doing good. Thank you for having me, and hopefully we got some people watching. Glad to be doing this live.
Yeah, it is. It's exciting. We usually don't do it live because, well, timing. But today we're like, what the heck? Why not? So it's been a while since we've done live stuff. So please bear with us. Hopefully you enjoy. Grant, I'll let you lead us off by talking about this wonderfully violent movie.
Yeah, so I think first we'll give some non-spoiler thoughts. I thought this movie was good. It's interesting because if you go look at the ratings on like Rotten Tomatoes, it's not great. I think Grant's got the graphic there.
Yeah,
It's got a 69% tomato meter and a 70% audience rating, which I think is low for this movie. Going into it, not having any expectations, just watching its review, I thought it was a really good movie, and I personally don't understand why it has such a low rating.
Yeah, I don't get it either. I think a lot of people expect it to be Star Wars, is the best I can kind of figure. We should say if you have kids, this is not a movie to show them. And
Yeah,
also, don't do what I did and watch it while you eat, because, oh boy,
it
uh,
gets graphic, and you see a lot.
yeah, it's just a little rough.
Mhm.
It's not that bad. Just 100,000 people die in an hour at some point, right? Like that's the
Yeah.
thing. Yeah, it's a little wild.
Mhm.
It's very good though. Like I even texted in our little Slack channel as I was watching. I'm like, why is this rated so low? I guess people just don't like the propaganda feel to it.
Maybe. I think the propaganda feel kind of gives it some of its flair and some of its just better qualities, personally.
Yeah, I mean it is charming, right? Because it almost feels like you're watching an in-universe movie,
Hmm.
like like you're a civilian. Um,
Absolutely.
it has a lot of interesting things to say, and we'll kind of get into that as we cross the spoiler barrier, which I'm ready to do whenever you are.
I'm ready to hop through too.
All
Thank
right.
you, always, never. This is a very solid movie choice.
Yes,
Um,
it is. Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert. So, for anyone who's watching and following along, I'm gonna kind of go through the plot that Wikipedia has because that's the easiest source to find. Just a quick way to run through the plot. So, a bit about the setting is it's in the 23rd century in Earth, and it's governed by the United Citizen Federation, which is a military government that was founded earlier or a few generations earlier by veterans after democracy and social scientists brought civilization to the brink of ruin. The only way you can gain citizenship is through federal service, which grants rights restricted from ordinary civilians, such as voting and breeding. Now, spacefaring, humans conduct colonization missions throughout the galaxy, bringing them into conflict with a race of highly evolved insectoid creatures dubbed arachnids, or bugs.
Yeah, and I do want to say one of my favorite moments throughout this movie was when I believe it was Rico was talking to one of the female soldiers and asked her why she joined up, and she goes, "I want to have kids, and this is the easiest way to get a license." It's like, what in the world?
Yeah, it's crazy to think you need a license to have kids, but I
I
mean,
mean, it could solve some problems.
mhm.
I don't know. I've been in Dollar General lately.
Yeah.
Uh,
So the movie kind of starts with Rico, who I guess is getting to the end of what would be high school for them. And he is with his girlfriend and then a couple of their friends, one of whom very much likes Rico. Um, Johnny Rico is his name, but he goes by Rico. Um,
because it's cooler.
yeah.
I mean,
Um,
I'm assuming you've seen Penguins of Madagascar. Oh man, because Rico's the guy they always ask for analysis.
I've not seen it. But his girlfriend Carmen wants to be a pilot, and she enters into um, why am I blanking? Federal service.
Yeah,
Um, And so Rico does it because he wants to be with her. And so Rico joins, and then their friend, whose name is apparently Isabel but goes by Dizzy, um, who's the one who is kind of in love with Rico. She joins, as well as their friend Carl, who is a psychic and does psychic things and joins the military intelligence. And yeah,
Yeah, and I mean, it's really well done. I do love that it starts out in high school, which is very much like 1997's 23rd century. Like it looks like it was made in 1997.
mm-hmm.
That's part of the charm, right? Like it's like future now kind of stuff.
Yeah, and so one thing, kind of moving a bit ahead, but some of the CGI later on to me has a bit of a feel of like Phantom Menace with some of the bugs. When you have a scene of a lot of the bugs like attacking someone or moving in, you can tell it was made in 1997, and that's nothing against it, but
Yeah, it
you
does
can kind
almost
of
look
tell.
claymation-y, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the bugs are honestly surprisingly really well done. Like they
Oh
look
yeah.
better than some things I've seen recently.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of terrifying, to be honest with you.
Oh, they're absolutely terrifying. I mean, at one point, they start ripping the brains out of people.
Which is fun. There is a scene though where one guy gets his brain sucked out, and he's screaming the whole time and is like yelling at them, which is just to me kind of like morbidly funny. I don't know. I might just have a twisted sense of humor, but there is something funny about that. Grant disagrees.
Yeah. Yeah. So at first, Rico's parents do not want him to join federal service. They want him to go to Harvard. They want him to get an education, and just they're like, "You're gonna die. Don't do it." But he's like, "Nope." Secretly, because he just wants to go be with his girlfriend.
I've
And
done that
then
before.
and
Don't
then
do it with
they
kids.
and then they join, and then she breaks up with him. And as he is getting ready to leave, he's talking with his parents as an asteroid hits their area, Buenos Aires, and kills millions of people, including all of their families. And he's like, "Well, I don't have family to go home to anymore.
Yeah.
I'm gonna
And
go kill
so
them bugs."
it is important to note that he's already quit the service because he got
Yes.
he became a squad commander and then told one of his guys to take off his helmet during a live fire exercise.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm remembering correctly, in the middle of this exercise, the guy takes off his helmet and a little green guy pops up and somebody turns and shoots it and accidentally hits the dude.
Yeah, it was team fire.
It was like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Also, why is that live fire when you have the little laser things that accomplish the same job? Also, why aren't they using the lasers? Like, I feel like if you have that tech, the bullets just aren't as good.
Yeah. And you can kind of see that. But yeah, he decides to leave, signs the paper, and then he wants to come back after they get blown up, and they're like, "Well, you signed." And then his drill sergeant Zim kind of goes, "Is this your signature?" And I don't think so. Rips. Do I have anything I can rip real quick? No. Rips the paper, and he goes back in the serve
like this.
A little more aggressively.
A little more dramatically. I just was looking for a piece of paper I could rip.
Mm-hmm.
Fortunately, so that has a little bit of stuff on it. No.
Yes. Trying to find the name of the guy who was the main the leader of the people, because the leader goes, "All right, we're gonna go invade the home planet of the bugs, and we're just gonna go wipe them out." However, they severely underestimate the bugs. And that's where a great reference earlier with the 100,000 people die in an hour.
Yeah, and it's like incredibly morbid. In the middle of it, though, the commanding officer is filming an interview for the local news, and
he dies.
And a bug speaks up on him and is like ripping him in half, and the reporter is still filming.
You got to get it on camera. Caught him in 4K getting ripped up by a bug.
It is hilarious. Like, again, in that kind of morbid sense of humor.
Yeah,
it is really funny.
Yeah. And so they eventually they just barely get out. Like 100,000 people die in an hour. Rico nearly dies. He gets his leg almost chopped off.
Mhm.
Um, and then when they get back, and he's mistakenly reported dead. And so Carmen, despite breaking up with him, is devastated. Um,
Because
and
after they
then
rip your heart out, they always want to stay friends.
yes,
Quote the guy whose
that's
name
a
I
line
can't
in the
remember.
movie.
Yeah,
That's a line in
I
the movie.
can't remember his name, but he has that classic '90s vertical haircut. Like he's the hair's only on top and it's all standing straight up.
Yeah,
I wish I bothered to get a picture of that.
yeah.
But
Well, then after they recover, Dizzy, and then their squad mate Ace, who is just another private who wants to serve. They join their former high school teacher Razchek.
I think that's right. Yeah.
We're gonna go with Razchek. Um, his special forces unit called the Roughnecks. Um, and then Rico ends up killing a tanker bug, as they're called, by just shooting a hole or stabbing a hole in its back and throwing a grenade in it.
As you do.
As you do, yeah. And he gets promoted to being a
Corporal.
corporal.
Which, if you're not familiar with the Army's ranking system, it's a good way to become familiar with it. I had to kind of figure out who was what and what was who. Yeah.
Yeah.
By the way, I was able to find a photo of Ace. Ace is the guy I was talking about.
Okay.
For those of you wondering what the vertical haircut looks like, that's the vertical haircut, and that is the lowest resolution file I possibly could have gotten. I got it on short notice, and so you can see it standing
even better.
straight up because it's 1997.
Yeah, makes it even better though that it's so low quality. So then after that, they get a distress call on Planet P where they have to go to an outpost, and that's being overwhelmed, or they have to go to an outpost, and then they get quickly overwhelmed by bugs. And then Carmen and Xander, who's a character we didn't mention earlier, he is sort of a he's not a villain or a bad guy necessarily, but he's trying to. I think he likes Carmen.
Best I could figure, they had met before, and I couldn't quite understand how that went.
He was the football player.
He was the football player. Okay.
Yeah, so he was a football player who was kind of flirting with her during one of their games. And then she ends up being a pilot, and they end up working together. And so they're the group that come in and get him out. But just before they get out, Razchek gets mutilated badly, and Rico has to shoot him and kill him. Which is sad, but then Dizzy also dies in that fight on Planet P, and then they get out and they have a little funeral per se for Dizzy, and then our boy Carl comes back. Good old Carl.
Allow me to stop you for 2 seconds.
Go for it.
I'm sorry. So when they have the funeral for Dizzy, I love how the raising of the arms is just the salute thing, and then they just throw the body into space. Like it's not like they buried her or anything like that. They just jettisoned it and saluted. Like it was kind of funny, honestly.
Yeah.
This whole movie is kind of funny, and I do also want to mention. So as we're coming off of, I believe it was that initial attack where 100,000 people died in an hour.
Mm-hmm.
There's a news footage that plays, and it's like a debate between somebody who thinks the bugs are smart and another guy who's offended that the first person thinks the bugs are smart. It's like why do you take offense to that? And he's like angry. He's like that. The thought that smart bugs exist offends me. And it's
the idea that there could possibly be a smart bug was just so offensive to this guy. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was right after the 100,000. They're like, maybe the bugs are smarter than we thought there are. Nay, they cannot be smart.
I'm offended.
I'm offended.
Which is satire ahead of its time, everyone.
Yeah. So then at that point, Carl, who's now a very high-ranking colonel, explains to Rico that they were deliberately sent into the trap, justifying it as a necessary sacrifice to prove the existence of a brain bug, an intelligent arachnid strategically directing the others. So then he gives Rico command of the Roughnecks and promotes him to a lieutenant. And they want him to go back to P, Planet P, to capture the brain bug.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because then they see the bug and then think it exists and they're like, okay, we already sent you into a trap once. Guess what? You're going back.
Of course. I
Mhm.
mean, why not? It's we sent you into a trap and we're sorry. So
We're sorry.
do it
You know what
again.
we're gonna do? We're sending you back.
Yep,
These
we're
bugs
going
are smart. They are smart. We're sending you back.
right, but at least like they bothered to like airstrip they blew up stuff and like there was a whole
Mhm.
thing. It was
Yeah.
good. It was better. I also enjoyed that after even the trap attack though, they had the air bombings come in. It's like we learned, right? The bugs are now
Mhm.
like why not just bomb them anyway? Like
I don't know. I think, well, you kind of find out why because they wanted to keep the brain bug alive so they could dissect it and figure out the strategies.
sounds like we
So
just need a Death Star because we know where they are. Just blow up the planet.
sounds good to me.
It worked twice for the Empire. Why not for the Federation?
Well, technically it didn't work,
I know.
depending on how you look at it. But so they send them back to Planet P to go back in and find it. As the battle commences, huge amount of ships are getting destroyed, including the one that Carmen and Xander are on. So
Mhm.
she and Xander have to barely flee and escape in a shuttle, and then they crash land into an underground tunnel system. Um,
Yep.
and they just so happen to go right where the brain bug is. Plot
Like,
convenience.
yeah. And I do love though that they land in the worst possible spot, and the first thing that Xander does is tuck a knife in his boot.
Mhm,
Like, so thus far we've seen a lot of bugs that just die, and
mhm.
because of gunfire. But it takes a lot of gunfire. Like they're tough things.
Yep.
Like it takes like 5 guys to take one out after firing for 10 minutes. And then this
Mhm.
guy packs a knife and he's like, this will be handy because if I
This will
die,
do it.
maybe I can gut them.
Yeah,
Maybe.
just maybe. As you would probably expect, landing in an underground cave on this planet, they get just captured by bugs. However, they don't get killed by bugs, and that's the important thing because everyone else to this point who has been attacked by a bug has been killed,
Yeah.
but not them. Um,
Which is interesting.
it is interesting.
Why is that, Grant?
I don't know why is it almost like it's plot convenience.
We have to
Um,
feed the brain bug
yes, the brain bug wants information. The brain
and
bug wants it now.
brains.
Um, Yes, so out comes the brain bug. And actually, while this is going, Rico is talking with them and is like, "Oh, they just crash landed. We need to go send people to rescue." And at first, he goes, "Oh, well, they're dead because they can tell there's bugs." And he's like, "They're dead. We're not going to go after them." But instead, they start going and they're going to meet up with the other crews, and they get to this sort of Y intersection where this way leads to. It's kind of for me. It's easier if I do it this way. This way leads to where the rest of the people are, and this way leads to where Carmen and Xander are. And he gets this
Convenient.
sort of gut feeling and kind of gets told the direction they are by, we find out to be Carl. Um,
Because
and
psychic, that's important.
it is important, the psychic.
Yes.
These are not the droids you're looking for. Um, yeah. So they go, and they say essentially you're practically committing treason. People have gotten hanged for this, and he's like, "All right, everyone else go. 2 people come with me."
Yep.
So then they go and they rescue Carmen. Xander gets killed, and Xander is the one
Thank
Grant was
goodness.
referring to, who gets his brain pulled out and is screaming while it's getting pulled out.
Yeah. He's just like, ah, oh, and then it was something like someone like me is gonna kill you and all of your race as they're sucking his brain out. It's like, buddy, you're dead.
Hmm.
Die.
Yeah. And they manage to escape and get Carmen out, not before their squad mate Watkins gets killed.
Right.
But they hold them at bay with a mini nuclear bomb.
That's what that was. That's why when
Yeah.
they shot it into the cave, everything exploded.
I thought it was just a grenade, but no. Wikipedia says that was a miniature nuclear bomb.
Which again makes sense though, because they shot it down into that thing, and my first thought was, how in the world did they collapse all of that with one grenade? And if they have that grenade, why aren't they just using that? Well, it's a nuke. Makes sense. Cool.
Yeah. So Watkins sacrifices himself so the others can escape with Carmen. And then on the surface, they learn that the brain bug has been captured. And guess who captured him? It's their former drill sergeant, Zim, who earlier in the movie wanted to go to war, and they said, no, you can't. You're too high ranking. You'd have to drop down and be a private to go.
And
And
so he dropped
eventually,
down.
you find out he dropped down, became a private, and he's the one that captured the brain bug, and becomes a hero.
Yeah, and it's fantastic. And I love how Neil Patrick Harris, the psychic Doogie Howser in this one, is talking about how like nobody's going to remember the day that Zim became a hero, and at that point they realized that Zim's the hero.
They're not going to remember us. They're going to remember Zim. Zim is our hero.
Which is hilarious when you grew up like I did, and there was Invader Zim on Cartoon Network. I don't know. It's completely unrelated, but it's still kind of funny. Yeah.
And so then it ends with a propaganda advertisement. So we're about to get into that aspect of the movie.
Which, if you look at this Rotten Tomatoes image, it's the Know Your Foe right here.
Yeah,
I could have cut that out, but I didn't. So there you go.
Yeah. So the propaganda will come back to, but there's a propaganda advertisement that details how the brain bug is being invasively studied to learn its secrets and ensure humanity's victory. Then the ad encourages the viewers to enlist and do their part in the war so they can become like Carmen, who's now the captain of her own ship, and Rico, who enthusiastically leads his troops into another battle.
Yeah, and then like they keep going down the list, and it's like, how many of these people died? 100,000 in an hour.
That's why we need you to go die and be Death Father.
Right. You can become a citizen.
Yes.
And maybe have kids.
Yeah. I've talked enough. I know you wanted to talk about some of the production side of it, and then after that, we can get into the propaganda and some of the ideas behind stuff that happens in the movie.
Yeah, it made money barely. Like it was a John Carter situation. I think it made like $11 million, but unlike John Carter,
It made a little more than that. It made 121. What was the budget?
100 to 110.
Okay, yeah, it did not make as much. Yeah.
Yeah. So it initially started development as a completely different movie, which spawned out of like the RoboCop producer, and the writer who was Ed Neumeyer, and then stop motion animator. That is probably why the bugs look so stop motiony.
Probably, yeah.
I bet they had the stop motion guy. I'm not sure on that. And then anyway, he couldn't find anything. And so Neumeyer had been struggling separately to develop stuff. And he kind of realized that he should do a story called Bug Hunt at Outpost 7, which is interesting because, that had pretty much been done exactly in a 1959 novel called Starship Troopers. Like, by exactly, I mean exactly. Like the two guys, it was almost like, hey, copy my homework, but change it a little bit. That was what that was. And so,
but not intentional at all. He just made this story.
Right. And so he said at the time, I wanted to do, quote, a big, silly, jingoistic, xenophobic, let's go out and kill the enemy movie. And I had settled on the idea that it should be against insects. I wanted to make a war movie, but I also wanted to make a teenage romance movie, which those are two genres that go together like vampires and werewolves and romance, just like Twilight. It works, but then they started working on it as Starship Troopers. They hired the director, who was Phil Verhoeven. I would believe you pronounce it Verhoeven, something like that. And so he said at the time, I like science fiction movies. I mean, the Star Wars series is a delight, or is delightful, But the main reason I decided to do Starship Troopers was Phil Tippett, who was the stop motion animator. I had worked with Phil on RoboCop and felt that was really interesting. So it's essentially RoboCop 2, if you don't count RoboCop
in my opinion,
2.
there's some similarities to even Ender's Game.
Yep.
Not exactly. But if you look at in terms of humans fighting these bugs, in this one the bugs are actually more aggressive and are actually attempting to fight. Where in Ender's Game, what they didn't know is that the bugs did not even plan to attack again.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of similarities, in my opinion, between Ender's Game and this in terms of bugs and people going into the military or into the system in Ender's Game and going up quickly and becoming commanders and going out and defeating these bugs and insects.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you could argue that Ender's Game was probably based on the book, or they're kind of spun off of.
That's very possible, yeah.
Yeah. Now, part of the interesting thing here is all of that just happened in 1993. And you're saying, wait a second, Grant, didn't this movie come out in 1997? It did. And it didn't start production until like 1995. And so it just kind of popped out of there. Pre-production began in earnest in September of 1995. And then, it just kept going. And they cast Michael Ironside and Jake Busey. Jake Busey had to straighten up that hair a little bit. The special effects. Now, this is interesting. About half the budget of this movie was dedicated to realizing the 500 special effects shots. Tippett Studio was mainly responsible for producing effects related to the arachnids, while Sony Pictures Imageworks was tasked with the spaceship effects. So I believe I don't think it was CG. I think it might have been stop motion.
Interesting.
I'm not sure on that.
If I'm not mistaken, they talked about in the budgeting how a big portion of the budget went to CGI.
Okay. So I don't know what Tippett was doing. I'm not really sure how that went.
Let's see, special effects.
I'm looking at that.
About half of the budget was dedicated to the 500 special effects shots.
Right. So that
did you read that already?
Yeah, I did. I'd already read that. Yeah. But it's just interesting to me that it doesn't mention a lot of CG, which makes sense. It's 97.
In one of the paragraphs, it says the final designs included the warrior, tanker, plasma, hopper, and brain bugs. While CGI was the main method of realizing the creatures, some practical appliances were built by Amalgamated Dynamics, included 2 full-scale mechanized warrior bugs capable of lifting an adult in their jaws.
I bet that's not terrifying at all.
Not at all.
Not
terrifying whatsoever.
No, it's perfectly. I mean, you see them every day in Southern California as you cross the street. That's how big the cockroach problem has become out there. Yeah. Now, when it was released, this is the interesting part. It was just not. It didn't work. Like, no, it didn't make a ton of money. It was the 34th highest grossing film in 97, which doesn't sound that bad. But it is kind of that bad. Then,
great, yeah.
So the first trailer for Starship Troopers was released in 96 in front of Star Trek First Contact, because back then, guys, Grant, I know you're not old enough to remember this.
I'm older than you.
I'm not old enough to remember it either. Back then, you had to go to the movie to see a trailer.
No way.
Yeah, that's why all the trailers were on things. Yeah. Anyway, so then they had the second trailer playing before Men in Black and Air Force One. It got delayed by like 3 weeks, and then by 2 months, and then by another 2 months. Yeah, but it was just they were waiting to finish the movie. The producer had said that it would never make its money back, which, I mean, okay.
I mean, it barely did.
Yeah, critics didn't love it. They didn't realize it was a satire, and they thought that it was literally the Nazis.
Yeah, so that's a perfect segue into the politics and propaganda of the movie. Again, this is from
Yes.
the Wikipedia article, but it explores a lot of different themes: patriotism. You see a bit of the authoritarianism and how stuff is run, the military, like militarism, colonialism. Um, and so Verhoeven interpreted the original Starship Troopers novel as fascist, nationalistic, totalitarian, can't read, and in favor of military rule, which was antithetical to the director's beliefs. He grew up under the Nazi occupation of the Netherlands during World War II, and so he wanted to help use the film kind of deconstruct and undermine those themes. Um, and
So
so
for those of you who didn't connect the dots, the director of the movie said to the guy that wrote the book, "I disagree with you, but I'm still making the daggum movie."
mhm. And so, in my opinion, this has a very from the beginning, from the opening propaganda video, you can tell it's almost entirely a propaganda movie. All the different stuff throughout it, the one you mentioned with the scientist, the one at the end of the movie, just all throughout, there's a bunch of propaganda. It's kind of hard to tell what's true and what's not. Is the 100,000 in an hour an exaggeration because they wanted to get people to enter the military so they could go attack and kill the bugs? Who really
I would
knows?
doubt that because to me, 100,000 people dying in an hour does not inspire me to go join the military.
You never know.
Um, I mean,
Um,
I don't know.
yeah, so
Maybe
some of the themes and
iconography.
iconography, there we go. I'm smart. Um, they take inspiration from the German Nazi regime and the Italian National Fascist Party. So some inspiration from the Nazis and the Fascist Party from Italy, led by Hitler and Mussolini, respectively. The United Citizen Federation, um, their flag, they made to resemble the Nazi coat of arms. Their uniforms resemble those worn by the Nazi secret police. And then the infantry uniforms are more similar to Mussolini's black shirts. Um, and they were used in part because Germans made the best looking stuff, but you also want to use the aesthetic in an artistic way. Um, some of the other some of the other aspects that influence them are
What when you're trying to find that, I want to
mhm,
say like all of this, it's not incredibly heavy-handed. You're right, the propaganda is there, but like to me, the I didn't it didn't dawn on me the movie was just a straight up in-universe propaganda film until about halfway through. I thought we were seeing like some propaganda that they might be seeing. It didn't dawn on me that this was a thing that was made in this universe to be propaganda, which is cool. But if you don't realize that, I can see how you wouldn't like it because you're just sitting here like, why in the world did I just watch the Nazis for 2 hours? But it does benefit from not having like a villain. Like the bug is the enemy, but like the bug is a bug, and so you're not supposed to like rationalize with it. Which
mhm.
I guess is part of the propaganda, right?
Yeah, and one of the propaganda things I thought was hilarious was the one where they had all the kids fighting over the gun. They had all the kids. They were like, "Here's a gun," and then all the kids are like, "I want it! I want it! I want it!" It's like you're training them while they're young. You're getting them. You're trying to just get them to be want to be involved in the military.
It
Um,
reminded me of the scene from Borat where he's introducing everyone to the kindergarten kids and they're all holding AK-47s. Yeah.
that's the main part of the what they took from the two groups. But they also did some stuff with the citizenship and what you had to do. 'Cause I mean, there was a bunch of rights that were reserved only for citizens, and you had to essentially serve in the military. Um, like in one of the scenes in the boot camp shower scene, they have different characters discussing the reasons that they enlisted. One wanted to be a politician. One wanted to just have kids and needed a license for that. Someone wanted a scholarship, so they didn't just have to work on a farm. Just a whole bunch of different options, stuff that should just be anyone should be able to do. they couldn't do. You couldn't even vote um, without being a citizen, without doing the military, being in the federal service. Um,
I want to mention this. So the nudity in the shower scene was criticized, but the director believed such criticism was hypocritical because you could show everything else in this movie, all the extreme violence, but they were going to pick apart the nudity. Now there
and
were a couple of instances of nudity in this movie.
mhm,
I'm sure they made Grant very uncomfortable. I know they made be fairly uncomfortable,
mhm.
um, but like it's fairly tastefully done, I guess. It does kind of make you wonder, like, what in the world are they doing here? And then
Yeah.
you hear like
But
all
then
these
there's
people.
also the violence too, which in my opinion, like I'm not a person who likes super violent movies or super violent anything. It was a little too much for me in parts. I had to fast forward. Like when they first showed the brain bug, I fast forwarded through that.
Yeah,
Um, and then
it,
the people getting stabbed by the bugs and stuff, I fast forwarded through that because that was a lot too.
it is a lot, and then you see the 100,000 people that have died in that hour, and they're just littered there, torn in half. It's intense. It's it's
It's very intense.
it's intense. This isn't your Star Wars. This is
Mhm.
like this is World War II in the stars. And we're the bugs.
Yeah. All
Yep.
right. So I mean that's essentially most of the movie.
Yeah,
Do you want to go ahead and move into our criteria,
I do, but I
or
want to
did you have
talk
something
a
else you
little
wanted to
bit
add?
before
Go for it.
that he the guy that directed it made a sequel.
Mm-hmm.
I believe. Actually, no, I'm sorry. It was not. He so the relative failure derailed the plans. He moved on, and then it got two other sequels: Starship Heroes 2, which came out 7 years later. It was directed by Tippett from a script by Newmeyer, and featured no returning cast or characters, which means it was dirt cheap. And then and then they had a second sequel, which brought back an older Rico.
Mm-hmm.
And then they did like CGI movies from 2012, which sees the return of Rico Jenkins and Ibanez with different voice actors. While Starship Troopers: Traitor of Mars was written by Newmeyer and features voice acting by Van Dien and Meyer. Um, Supposedly there will be a reboot, but eventually, um, yeah, they want the reboot to be more faithful to the book, which is more antithetical to this because the book was a Nazi propaganda piece and this was a Nazi propaganda satire.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I kind of wish it had made more money because I kind of would have loved to see what these higher budget sequels are. I can't see myself sitting through 7 to 8 hours of. I mean, this is a B movie feel, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
it's not a B movie, but it could have been, and you would have understood why. So I would imagine a low budget B movie is like a C movie,
Yeah.
which ouch.
Yeah.
Um,
Which we don't do letter grades here, but do we want to go
Airs
ahead
on the
and?
Hallmark movie. No. B is not a. It's not a grade. It's like a level of movie. It's based on budget and,
Oh,
um, yeah, it's based on like budget and the cast.
gotcha.
So
Gotcha.
yeah, so lowering that would be ugly. We don't do letter grades here, but we are going to go ahead since we're about 40 minutes in, and we're gonna go ahead and go through our criteria. Grant, I'll let you begin. Do you believe the movie is rewatchable?
Yes.
Why?
It's just a good movie. It's funny to watch because all the propaganda scenes are hilarious, and in my opinion, you can see how throughout the movie you have this guy who didn't really even want to serve, almost left, and then turns into this like model soldier who takes over the Roughnecks and is like becomes a hero essentially. And you're like, how the heck did this guy get here?
And the answer is he chased after a girl.
hmm
It is a good teen romance movie.
I don't know about teen.
It's a good, very adult romance movie. It's the adult version of a teen romance movie. That's what it is. Not like that. I didn't mean
um,
it like that. Yeah, I think it's
um,
rewatchable
yeah.
too. I'm with you. And then the next sequel or the next thing that we talk about, do you believe that it set out to do what it did it that it accomplished what it set out to do? I'm glad no one's watching at the moment because that was terrible.
That was rough. What exactly did it set out to do, though?
I think it set out to be like a satire of the Nazis.
Yeah, so I think it worked. I think it did what it set out to do. Personally, if that's criteria going off of, I think it did what it set out to do.
I agree with you because it is very satirical, and the people who can't see that need to watch the movie again.
Mhm.
And
Yeah, I
yeah,
can see if someone doesn't like the satire feel, that's fine. I enjoyed it a lot. I thought it was hilarious. I thought it made the movie better because that kind of helps to make up for some of the other areas where like maybe they could have done this better, but then you go, it's a propaganda movie.
it's a satirical propaganda.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the charm of it, and that's why it is criminally underrated. There, we answered the title on the thing.
Why is it criminally underrated? Watch the movie and see. Is it a 70% or 69% nice? No, it's better than that.
It's
It's a
at
great
least an
movie.
80. It's a
Oh
very
yeah.
good movie.
Mhm.
Like it's not Citizen Kane, but it's pretty. Like it has a lot more to say than you would think it would when you.
Mhm.
Like I went in expecting Star Wars, and I got World War II in stars. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, it's not Star Wars all, at all, at all. But
Mhm.
it's very good.
Yeah, so to answer the illustrious, mysterious title, why is it underrated? It just is. I don't know exactly why. It had bad reviews. It's a satire film. It's a satirical propaganda film. That maybe it's not completely polished in some areas. Maybe it's not the best in every area, but it's a good movie. It's rewatchable. I mean,
So that answers our question as to whether it's over or underrated.
mhm,
It's
underrated.
underrated. Yeah, I think from best I could tell, the people who watched it at the time were unaware of it being a satire and are like, "Why in the heck are we watching Nazi propaganda again?" Um, and then
I
it
thought it
was
seemed pretty obviously satirically propaganda,
I think we live
but it's also
20
knowing that's what it's supposed to be.
we're also 25 years down the line.
Mhm,
So it was ahead of its time, from what I understand. I
mhm.
obviously did not live in 1997. I know you're getting old, so maybe you did. Um, but but it is
Yeah,
it's
I'm
fairly
so
obvious
old.
now, but there's some stuff that you couldn't like. I guess to kind of put an example to it, like just the mindless sending of people to war. Like I know they did that in World War II, and I know that's what the whole 100,000 in an hour thing was, but we did it again and again and again since then. And it almost becomes more obvious as the years go on.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't
Our
know.
final criteria is a real, built up. Is it a pass? Is it a fail?
It's a
Grant.
pass. It's a pass.
It's a pass.
Yeah. Well, it's very good. I honestly, if we did letter grades, it would rate fairly highly for me, but it is
Mhm,
without a doubt a pass. Like
absolutely.
it is much better than the Rotten Tomatoes suggest, and I'm
Mm,
glad that doing this show forced me to watch it.
yeah. And if
Um,
we're comparing this to John Carter that we did last week, this is a better movie. Easily.
that's is it
Yeah, easily.
okay? You could say that. I
It's a coherent story. It all flows together well. There's not parts wondering what the heck happened. What did I miss? What did I miss?
stop your
Yeah.
copyright claim. Anything more
Um,
than that. Yeah, no, I can see that. Personally, I think John Carter is a bit of an easier watch. Um,
it's an easier watch, yeah, but I would say this is a better movie in terms of flow, in terms of it's funny, it's got the propaganda. If you know what to expect going in, I think it's a better movie.
yep, just don't watch it with your kids or over dinner
Yeah.
because, who boy. Well, next week we wrap up our cycle, our space western cycle, and we do it with the Certified Rotten. So this is the torture movie, and I hear it's not really that bad, but it's still the torture movie. We're gonna go with the penultimate space western. We're gonna watch Cowboys and Aliens, which apparently just wants to be a Western set in space. I don't know. Haven't seen it ever. We're going to try to find the extended version, and if we cannot, we'll watch the theatrical. So if you're watching along with us, first off, thank you. Second off, that's what we're going to be doing. And I'm sorry if it isn't any good. So we might be roasting a movie next week. We shall see. But Grant, before we go, Grant, do you have anything else you'd like to say? All right. Well, if you enjoyed the show, go check out our Patreon over at patreon.com/theculturednerd. And there you can find us specifically, as well as just the Cultured Nerd in general. And if you want to keep the lights on, please support us and support the Cultured Nerd, because that does help pay for all this cool software and all the cool stuff we get to do, the graphics and all of that. Just if you want to support us, click on through the monocle and throw your money at the screen. As always, I have been your host, Grant Ingram. And joined by...
I am here. I'm just waiting a second. I've been your co-host, Grant Skillen. Thank you to each of our Patreon supporters, and thank you to Jose Navarro for our logo.
Yep. And if you've enjoyed, first off, subscribe, leave a like. Thank you so much for joining us. Click on or scan this QR code on the left to check out the rest of the Culture Nerd, and check out the QR code on the right to check out our other show, Much Talk About Nothing. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next week.